Well, Alex, thanks for jumping on today, man.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Happy to be here.
So you are in Minnesota.
That's right. Yep. I live kind of northeast of the Twin Cities, kind of close to the Minnesota-Wisconsin border.
Okay. And where is that where you're from originally?
No, I grew up in Wisconsin.
Okay. And
Yeah.
where's Outdoor Life based out of?
That's
Everywhere?
actually that's actually a harder question to answer than it used to be. Yeah, all of our editors work remotely. Um, we're owned by a private equity company called
Hmm.
Recurrent that has, offices in New York and San Diego and Miami, but none of the Outdoor Life employees work at any of those offices.
Hmm.
We all live, scattered about. Got folks in Montana and Virginia, North Carolina, Colorado. So yeah, we're
Tyler's
kind
in
of all.
Alaska, isn't he?
Yep, Tyler Friel is in Fairbanks, Alaska.
Yeah.
Um,
He's been on the show a couple times. I like that guy a lot. Yeah.
yeah, he's a
All
good
right, so
dude.
you guys are all spread out. But Outdoor Life was founded in, I believe, 1898.
That's right.
And like Tyler, I've interviewed many of your writers and subjects of pieces that they've written that I find interesting, and I think you guys do a great job of reporting on newsworthy topics that affect the outdoor industry, as well as just interesting stories. A kid shoots a huge buck, or whatever the case. So a record black bear gets shot, and I think I saw one got shot in New Jersey last week that you guys had a feature on.
Yeah, that's right. It was like a 770-pound black
Yeah,
bear. Just an absolute
yeah.
giant, giant bear.
I wonder, like in North Carolina, they get so big, but the bears don't hibernate. I wonder if New Jersey, if they're far enough north to where they actually hibernate or not.
Oh
But
man, that's a good question. The next
yeah,
time we do a big New Jersey bear story, we should ask the biologist that, state
yeah,
biologist that. I bet
I,
you're right. I bet they don't.
I'd be interested to know that. But then they don't have ever lose that fat reserve, so that's why they get so massive.
Yeah.
So how long have you been at Outdoor Life?
I've worked here for almost 15 years. It's basically been my only post-college professional job.
Okay, and how long is the editor in chief?
I've been the editor uh, for almost 5 years. Yeah.
Right on. Okay. Okay. So what I wanted to talk about today is we've seen like Pheasants Forever, for example. They stepped in, I think, a pretty big pile of excrement when they sponsored the annual Minnesota Governor's Hunt, the pheasant opener. And I understand they do that every year, but every
Yeah.
year they don't have the governor running for vice president of the United States, and a guy who's said multiple times he's has some issues with the Second Amendment and what type of guns we should own. So they kind of, in my opinion, missed the mark there. It would have been, I think, wiser for them to just say, "Hey, we're not participating this year because it is a political issue nationally." Um, and then they were deleting comments faster than Josh Bomar. Like they couldn't get out of their own way on social media. And the reason why I think, or why I believe they know they screwed up, is because they never posted anything on it. Like they didn't post any photos of Tim Walz there. These were just photo. One of them was a photo of a beer can that they were working with, and they deleted the entire post. So they took it on the chin pretty bad. I think they missed the mark on who their supporters were, by and large. I'm not saying that there aren't Democrat hunters, or that there aren't people that support them that are Democrats. They do, but I think the majority of hunters vote red.
Yeah.
I don't think that's debatable.
No,
Um,
that's not a controversial statement by any
yeah.
stretch of the imagination.
So, and I wanted to have you on today because I thought for a second Outdoor Life was like, hold my beer, Pheasants Forever. Look what we can do, because there was a piece that was written. Oh well, and a little back up there. So Tim Waltz used that opportunity very quickly. A photo op. I don't think I heard, like, read that one pheasant was shot. I don't
Yeah,
even
I
think
was
they ever
there.
covered it.
Do you want to know? Do you want? I was at that hunt. Do you want
Okay,
to know
yeah,
more details about
yeah,
it?
sure, love to.
So, so yeah, we can get into the Pheasants Forever stuff later, or not at all. I don't want to speak for them, but
Right.
just background context. Yes, there has been the Minnesota governor's hunt for, I think, 12 years, right?
Uh-huh.
And, it's kind of this event that is designed to support or kind of bring awareness to, the pheasant hunting tradition in Minnesota. Pheasants Forever is based here in Minnesota. Um, and promote hunting in a positive light.
Mm.
And yeah, it's kind of a photo op, it's kind of a media opportunity, but most years it is not a very controversial thing, right? The governor
Right.
goes out, he kind of shakes hands with folks, they get some pheasant hunting pictures, and it's this nice deal. Well, this year there's a little more extra heat on
Yeah.
this hunt because the governor of Minnesota is the vice presidential candidate in a very close and very contentious campaign season. So, so I went to this uh, event or photo op or hunt or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Got in, approved through the Walz campaign, and just kind of tagged along as media. And what I can say is there was a ton of folks there in the field that day, a bunch of media members, mostly kind of mainstream media, local news reporters, some like television news, broadcast type people, and then some like I guess the campaign is calling them influencers,
Mm.
like social media types. Um, and there was a hunt, they were hunting wild birds, they were on private property, but it was, just kind of a typical, um, typical property in southern Minnesota. And there were four hunters. And they had some bird dogs and they kind of went around, made a couple passes through the field, and like all the media members just like
Uh-huh.
scuttled behind Walz, following along, trying to get a photo of him shooting. Um, he never actually did shoot. They flushed a handful of pheasants. Uh, Kind of only one that presented a good shot, and not Walz, but one of the other hunters shot the rooster and just kind of hit him in the back, hit him in the butt, and the bird went down, and they never did recover it.
Uh-huh.
Kind of looked around, and that was it. And then they flushed some birds wild, and flushed some that kind of flew back at like the camera guys, the video people, and flushed a bunch of hens, and
So we didn't have a
basically.
Dick Cheney moment, so that's good.
No, there was no Dick Cheney moment. There could have. This was a crazy. I mean,
It's so
this
weird
is a
now. Dick Cheney supports Harris Waltz, so it's weird that we like got that thing
yeah.
going on.
Yeah, I don't know how that intersects at all, but yeah, it was a very kind of surreal um version of a pheasant hunt, but they I've seen some of the like kind of uh some of the takes and commentary on this. They did have guns. I can
Mm.
confirm that. They were hunting wild pheasants. Tim Walz did not shoot one. There's the big kind of flub where he, was messing with the shotgun, that
Yeah.
really made the rounds. What happened there, um, is they were coming back to take a break and switch out some dogs, because it was hot.
Yeah.
They had three labs out there. The labs got tuckered out. It was too hot. So they were going to switch out the dogs and bring in some pointing dogs. Walls had unloaded his shotgun already and then was like, I think he was trying to lock the bolt back
Mm.
on his shotgun, to keep the chamber open. And he couldn't find, that carrier button to keep the
Oh,
bolt locked back. So he just kept like running the bolt back. And
everybody had fun with that. I mean, like this guy
everyone,
says he's a big shooter, doesn't know
yeah,
how to handle his shotgun that he says he shoots all the time. Uh,
exactly. So that was not a graceful moment for Tim Walz by any
yeah.
stretch of the imagination, but that's what happened. The gun was unloaded.
Hmm.
He wasn't trying to load it, but he couldn't get the bolt to lock back.
Huh.
in the open action position. So
Okay.
that's the deal.
But so, I mean, hunting did occur, but by and large, it's just a day celebrating pheasant hunting and a photo op for the governor,
Exactly.
which
It's a
I have no
media.
problem with, right? That's
Yeah,
cool. Right? That's
it's a
great.
media event.
Yeah.
Most times not controversial at all. This time,
Mm-hmm.
obviously anything related to the campaigns and firearms is gonna get heat. So
Yeah.
this one did.
Yeah. Well, so it took them less than 24 hours, and I mean the Harris Walz campaign to launch this website, which they, kind of were piggybacking on this pheasant opener. Say, hey, here's our new hunters anglers for Harris Walz website.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. We kind of all figured something like that was in the works. But then a day later, Outdoor Life publishes a piece called Harris Walz Campaign. It was the title of it. Harris Walz Campaign launches collection of hunters and anglers as it tries to appeal to rural men. All right. I mean, I've never really figured Outdoor Life like to be political one way or the other. But I took
Yeah,
issue with that.
can I correct you on this one real
Yeah,
quick?
yeah, sure.
So this actually ran before the hunt.
Okay.
Before the governor's hunt, and it ran um before the coalition was even launched.
Uh-huh.
So that I think that's where um we'll get into kind of what happened next,
Yeah.
but just for the timeline,
So that was like on October 6th, I guess, when it was
we ran it
published.
on a Friday, and the governor's hunt was on a Saturday.
Okay. Okay.
So,
So the day before, right on.
yep, day before. Yep.
Uh-huh. Okay, so I read the article and I was like, well, yeah, there was a couple issues that I had with it. Um, Number one, I like seemed like it was very friendly towards the Harris Walz campaign. The biggest problem I had with it was, well, the time frame leading up to the election. There's nothing reciprocal for the Trump campaign, and then the author Andrew McKean mentioned Project 2025, which Donald Trump has never claimed. They've disavowed it at every turn. So to throw that in there to me seemed like a total like, why are we mentioning this if the campaign has never claimed that? Which, much like you ran this story before the hunt, that Project 2025 thing was put out before Donald Trump even announced he was running for president again, and he's said, no,
Sure.
I don't know anything about that. He's never claimed it. So to put that in there seemed pretty disingenuous and put a spin on it that I was like, well, this is coming from that side of the fence for me.
Sure.
So I didn't think that was an honest, piece of reporting there. But I mean, you guys took a lot of heat for it. I don't know if you were expecting that. But what was y'all's like? What was your reaction internally when you're like, oh gosh, people are pissed?
Well, let's hit the issues you have with the piece first
Okay.
before we get into the feedback, because I think it's important to note, um, you know, you mentioned Pheasants Forever and how you feel like they kind of um, stepped in it, or I can't remember exactly what you said, but they kind of
Yeah.
flubbed it, and they didn't know who their supporters were. Um, like we there's a real key difference between Outdoor Life and an organization like Pheasants Forever, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like our job um, is to report the news. You know, we do a bunch of different stuff at Outdoor Life, right? We write gear reviews, we do, viral news stories, we do, hunting features and stuff like that. But I think kind of one of our highest purposes is to report news and issues that matter to hunters and anglers.
Mm-hmm.
So we do that not to like get likes or get positive comments. We do that because it's like the right thing to do for our community.
Mm-hmm.
And now kind of getting into your question, um, we know that sometimes we're going to take heat for that, especially in a campaign season. Um, when people are just kind of so already on edge and like just so ready to
Point
write a
fingers, like
comment or
immediately,
snap.
like yeah,
Yeah, pointing fingers, just ready to jump, kind of at any moment. We know that that's going to happen. But we feel that like our purpose and our mission, we have to do, we do this anyways, kind of regardless of the comments or the heat or whatever. Like our job is not to get likes. We don't need to do that. Um, so I did not know that I did not know that the backlash or blowback from this story was going to be so hot. Um, like I did not anticipate that. I know that anytime we write anything about politics or a candidate or policy, there's going to be, there's going to be like contention around it. I
right.
did not know that this one was going to like kind of catch the um I guess like self kind of propelling side storyline that it did. But even knowing, like looking back now, at the, knowing what I know now, we wouldn't have done anything different um, except for maybe acknowledging the fact that there was going to be more coverage in the
Mm-hmm.
future. Like this is not our only story
Yeah,
about the campaigns going forward.
because I
And
went
I
back and
think,
reread the article, and there
yeah,
was
go
no
ahead.
mention since then. Y'all wrote a follow up piece, which
Yes.
I think had to come. I mean, it was like necessary because you're taking all this heat. It was like, okay, well, now we have to publicly say this is our stance, just to clarify.
Yes.
And then you alluded to in that piece there would be more coverage on both sides of the political spectrum, but that wasn't mentioned in Andrew's article, which I think,
No.
which like left
No, it
me being like,
wasn't.
what the hell?
It wasn't. And that I think, yeah, and I think that's where some of the misunderstanding from the readership comes from. Um, but also, just from our perspective, so you can understand why we did this. We're writing like political pieces or like policy related pieces all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And we never say like, hey, here's a for example, Andrew McKean, the author of that piece that, you had some issues with and many readers had issues with. Andrew McKean also broke a story about the Biden administration banning recreational shooting on Bears Ears National Monument.
Mm-hmm.
Like he was the first, Outdoor Life was the first one to publish that. No one else in our space saw it coming or had it. So we wrote that story. It's critical of the Biden administration. In that piece, we did not say, hey, in the future, we're going to write a positive piece about the Biden administration.
Right.
It's just like this is part of our coverage. Just what we do.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the stories are positive for candidates you like. Sometimes the stories are positive for candidates you don't like. Sometimes they're negative for candidates you like. Like um, that's just how the coverage goes. And overall, and I strongly feel this way, if you look at our coverage overall, collect 2 years worth of bylines, um, I think you will see a very like balanced approach in terms of, coverage for conservatives and or Republicans and Democrats.
Mm-hmm.
It's like I think we try to be fair um, to either side and uh, impartial whether you're a Republican or Democrat. Where we have bias is toward supporting, the folks who support hunting and fishing, conservation, Second Amendment, right? Like we're not the New York Times
Yeah.
in that we act as we try to act as a totally impartial, unbiased media entity. That's
Oh
not
well,
what
they
we're
don't
doing.
act like that. New
Well,
York
that's what they
Times.
say, right? That's
That's a
their
left leaning publication if I've ever seen one.
sure,
Uh,
but that's their promise, right? Is that
right.
they
Like
we
CNN
are
reports the news, right?
we
Okay.
we are
Or
an
Fox
impar
reports the news. It's all
yeah,
public.
whatever, whoever you want to pick,
Mhm.
that kind of traditional
You guys are
mainstream
above
meat.
that.
I don't know if we're above it. I think that's like a
Well, if you're reporting actual news in an unbiased way, then you're above the New York Times and CNN and MSNBC and Fox News.
We hope to be,
Mm-hmm.
that's the goal and the spirit of what we try to do. But we do have a bias, right? And we do have objectives, and the objectives are to promote conservation, public lands access, hunting, Second Amendment rights.
Yeah.
So like all of our coverage is kind of geared toward supporting those things. And sometimes there will be Democratic candidates who are doing a good job in those categories, and
Mm-hmm.
we're going to write about them too.
Yeah, but I think you
So,
took a lot of heat because Tim Walz has repeatedly made anti 2A comments. Like, and people
yeah,
don't really care. Like people like me, I'm like, I don't give a crap if he goes on a pheasant hunt. The dude doesn't think I should own an AR-15. So to
yeah.
me, he's anti Second Amendment. Like there's no gray area for most. I would say for most of your constituents, your viewers, your audience, most of them, there are people that are like, and there are plenty of hunters that are like, well, you don't really need an AR-15. Well, Second Amendment wasn't designed for hunting. Like so, you're
So,
off base there anyway.
this is a great distinction. It's like I want to be able to publish that piece
Mm-hmm.
and for you to say, I'm not buying it, Tim Walz. I don't believe what you're saying.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that. Right? Like our job is not to say, yeah, Tim Walz is right here. You need to listen to him, readers.
Yeah.
Our job is to say, here's what Tim Walz is saying. Now, and here's some extra information on it. We also
Mm-hmm.
have, commentary from the NRA and NSSF in that story.
Yeah.
So, you know, here's what folks are saying. Cable Smith, you decide whether you want to believe Tim Walz or not. And if you don't, good for you. Don't vote for him.
Okay, but then so why include the piece about if we're reporting the news and the administration, the Trump administration or campaign has repeatedly said we don't have anything to do with Project 2025. Like that seemed like a total dig, in my opinion. Like I don't know why it was in there if they've said we have nothing to do with that, and I can't find any
Yeah.
evidence of them ever saying that they did.
So, all right. The Project 2025 stuff. Um, yes, like for folks who aren't spun up on this, basically this is a conservative proposal from a think tank called the Heritage Foundation, which was written by a variety of authors. Um, and I don't have the exact language in front of me, but it's basically this is you know written by and for conservatives for the next administration of the United States of America. And since this came out, all sorts of media has been picking it apart and highlighting certain bullet points, certain elements. And candidate Trump has distanced himself from it. As you said, he said, I didn't write it. I don't know where it came from. It's not my thing.
Right.
All true. Um, Within this like reporting job, and you're going to see this in the stories. We have two big stories coming up. Um, One examines the potential of a Harris-Walz administration and what that would mean for hunters and anglers. And one does the same for a Trump-Vance administration. And in this reporting job, like our goal is to try to give folks a perspective on what that administration might mean for them. And so what things can we take to like inform readers on what that administration might do?
Mm-hmm.
We can take what they say, right? Either in interviews with us or interviews with CNN or a debate or whatever. We can take their kind of on the record quotes, which we know any politician, especially in campaign season, will say lots of things.
Yeah.
You're already saying like you don't believe Walz on the gun stuff.
I'm
Fair
just
enough.
going off what he said, which he has actually said that. Trump never
Yeah.
said anything about Project 2025. So I'm saying, yes, Tim Walz, you've said we shouldn't own what you want to call weapons of war, right? I
Yeah.
mean, that's his quote. He's talking about
Yeah.
AR-15s. Well,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah,
He said
and
that.
he also says that he supports the Second Amendment. Like
I
we
don't
have
think you
that.
can say that though once you've already made that like claim. Like to
Sure.
me,
Yeah.
you're out.
Right.
You're not for the Second Amendment.
Exactly.
Like
Yeah,
you're
exactly.
done.
That's your opinion. His
Right.
opinion is you can support the Second Amendment and support a assault weapons ban, which that's what he's saying, right? So, and you have 100% you know, ability to be skeptical about that or not believe that or say those two things are incompatible. That's a very
But let me
valid
mention
argument.
this. Like what funds conservation in this country by and large?
Firearm sales and ammunition sales.
Right. And what are the two most popular rounds in America? 223 and 9 millimeter.
Yeah,
A lot of
no
those
doubt.
people don't even
Yeah,
hunt. But you know what? They're
for sure.
funding conservation. And you
Yeah,
want to get
absolutely.
rid of a huge component that funds conservation. So it's
Yeah,
two things. It's anti Second Amendment, and then at the end of the day, financially speaking, it's anti conservation funding.
yeah, absolutely.
So
Yeah,
I don't
no,
get it, but
no argument there from me.
right.
Um, but kind of going back to it, we can take what the candidates say.
Mm-hmm.
We can take what they've done in the past. That is valid information. And then we can take what folks are saying about them. So that means their, advisors, representatives, um, previous colleagues, and also the folks who are running against them, right? Like if we're covering the Walz campaign, it's fair to get commentary from folks who are critical of Harris Walz. And, if we're covering the Trump Vance campaign, it's fair to get commentary from folks who are critical of them. Well, this Project 2025 is written in large part by administrators from the previous Trump campaign.
Mm.
The author of Chapter 17, the Interior Department, is William Perry Pendley, who was the BLM director under Donald Trump. So, I think from just a fairness standpoint, it is fair to include information from Project 2025 while also saying that the president has distanced himself from it or says that he did not write it, which is all true, right? Like multiple things can be true at once.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then here's where the other like fairness element comes in. In our reporting on the Harris Walz campaign, she's saying, or their campaign is saying, we will not be a cookie cutter version of the Biden administration. You're going to get a totally different administration under Harris Walz. I don't know. I don't know about that. I think
Right.
to be fair, you have to take some of the actions and objectives that the Biden administration made and write about them when you're covering Harris Walz. Even though Harris says that's not, we're different. We're a different campaign. It's not, so, you kind of have both candidates saying this thing isn't, don't let this reflect what my administration might hold. But like doing journalistic due diligence, I think you have to include some of that stuff with caveats.
Okay. Okay. I mean, I get it from your stance, but what I think a lot of people obviously felt like I did when they read it. And going back to what you said earlier, you didn't expect that the blowback would be as intense as it was.
Yeah.
And that prompted you guys to write a response piece.
Yep.
And so talk about that.
Yeah. So we had planned these two deeper like perspective pieces on the two potential administrations. Like those have been in the works for weeks. Like that's why I was going to the Walz pheasant hunt, was for the opportunity to interview Walz to fill in quotes for this story, for one of these stories. What we hadn't planned was this, I guess, like rebuttal or explanation story that that we did have to run because of the commentary, or I felt we had to run because of the commentary of that first piece. which is basically like an explanation of the things that we're talking about now. It's like
Right.
how we cover politics, why we do things the way that we do. You know, there's a lot of there was a lot of misunderstanding that folks thought that that first story meant we were endorsing Harris Walz. We
I
are
didn't
not.
take it like that. I just took it
Yeah,
as a
not you, but other comments. Yeah,
yeah. I mean, I didn't like it, but it to me it wasn't like boom, we're endorsing them. But
yeah,
I mean, we did. And I told you, and we were emailing, and obviously don't want to talk about your political beliefs, but and we wouldn't talk about Andrews except for its public record
yeah,
because it came out that he's donated what I saw was at least $300 to the Montanans for Jon Tester reelection campaign.
right.
So when you have the author, like, here's the backstory, he's donating to Democrats, and then you read that, and it's like, well, okay, this maybe he's putting his own personal touch on it a little too much. But I don't think if that wouldn't have come out, I don't think you would have taken the heat that you did personally. Like
Yeah,
there still would have been some flack, but when that became public information, which it was, I
yeah,
mean, it was already public. You can research it and look it up, like it is public info. But
yeah,
somebody actually did that. I think that was a pretty bad look.
yeah. Campaign donations are public information,
Mm-hmm.
right? And to backtrack here, like before we were kind of making New York Times comparisons or like traditional mainstream media comparisons, like many traditional news gathering organizations do have policies where reporters reporting on politics are not allowed to contribute to campaigns, right? They're not allowed to make campaign donations. Um, for the very issue that we have here, right? It's like,
Right.
our hunting and conservation editor, Andrew McKean, is donating his own money to the Jon Tester campaign. So as I said before, like we're not the New York Times, right? We
Right.
are we are biased, right? We have a bias toward conservation and public lands. And I talked to Andrew about this before this call because I wanted to get his perspective. And he was like, "Yeah, I donated money to Jon Tester. He's like the politician from Montana who has done the most to support public lands, conservation, hunting. Like he is, a really strong advocate for the things that I have been writing about my entire career." So yes, you're right. It's a bad look. It's like it like got hot on social media, but like if you look at it more deeply, Andrew McKean has he's got a cattle ranch in eastern Montana. That's where he lives. He's been writing about, hunting and conservation, public lands his entire career. Here's this candidate who has been really strong on all these issues. Like, for example, uh, he's been promoting the Lands Water Conservation Fund.
Mm-hmm.
If you remember that big one,
Yeah.
the Great American Outdoors Act. One of the deals is to like fully fund the LWCF. Jon Tester was on that since like 2009, right? He's just been like a key supporter of that. And they ran that through in 2019, and Donald Trump signed that into law. It
Yeah.
was like a great bipartisan deal.
Oh yeah, that was a huge
John,
victory from both sides of the aisle coming together, which doesn't
yeah,
happen enough anymore, right?
doesn't happen enough. Jon Tester was a big part of it. So it's like, we got to take some of that detail into account as well if we're going to have an honest conversation about like how bad is it that the author of this piece is like supporting Democrats. Well, he's supporting one Democrat who's been like a really strong proponent of conservation of public lands for his, entire time in the Montana Senate, where that's where Andrew's from. So like you can get really into the weeds in like this impartial, unbiased, like what a journalist should do, what they shouldn't. Like some like the hardest hardcore of like the folks on this would argue that a journalist shouldn't even vote. Like they need to be totally unbiased. They should not vote. They shouldn't go to
Well, that's
uh,
ridiculous.
they shouldn't go to primaries, right? If you go to a primary vote, then like your community can see that you're like a registered Republican or a registered Democrat. So there's like these rules from traditional media, traditional mainstream media that I'll be honest, like we don't really follow those. Like we have members on staff or staff members who are lifetime members of the NRA, right? We
Mhm.
have folks who are on the boards, on state boards of like backcountry hunters and anglers. Um, lots of us are members for Ducks Unlimited or Pheasants Forever, all these different like we're involved in our community, like our hunting, fishing, shooting community, and that does create some level of some level of bias there.
Mhm.
Um, but I will say again, like I always, and I really strongly believe this, like the bias is toward promoting and supporting hunting, fishing, conservation, Second Amendments. Like that's where our bias comes from.
Mhm. Well, yeah, and I get it. And when you look at it on like not a local but a state level, I understand. But by and large, like a guy like me just looks at it as like, okay, so what party introduces all the anti-hunting legislation? The left, all of
Yeah.
it. What
Yeah.
party introduces all of the anti-gun legislation? The left. So
Yeah.
for me, it's like cut and dry. Like there's just like it's black and white. So it's interesting
That's
for me when
fair.
I look at a guy who says I'm in this to support conservation, but I'm financially donating to the party that wants to defund conservation mechanisms and the party that introduces all of the anti-hunting legislation in the United States.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
not specific to the United States. The left in whatever country you're in is the side that introduces anti-hunting legislation. I'm never going
Yeah.
to support that.
Yeah. And I don't want to challenge your views. Well, I don't want to try to change your views or
We
like
need
you.
the conservatives need to work on public land. That's our one thing. Like, but to me, it's putting the cart before the horse. And this is all just my opinion, right? But
Yeah.
that's how I view that
And
dichotomy.
you're totally entitled to those opinions,
Yep.
and I think that here's how I feel about it. If you want to have strong stances, you want to be like, I'm never going to support XYZ. Good. Like that. Like there's something like kind of noble about that, right? Like you know who you are, you know what you care about, you know what you believe in. And if you want to have that strong of a stance, you better be really educated, right? You better really know who you're like going in for, like throwing your name in the hat for, throwing
Mm-hmm.
down for, like full time, right? Because that's kind of the promise that you're making. And I would contend that reading stuff, reading content about the side that you don't agree with is just more good information. You don't have to agree with it. Like
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't have to change your view, or and also know that like we're not trying to change your view, whatever your view may be, unless if you're anti-hunting, then we actually are trying to change your view. But other than that, like we're trying to inform you so that if you want to like really be dug in, like more about the Walz Harris campaign.
Mm-hmm.
You like if you read our story on what's coming out, or our story that's coming out, depending on when this interview airs. It'll be out probably when this hits. Like you will read quotes in there from Walz specifically about how he feels about an assault weapons ban. There's details in there about um, Harris's background as a gun owner and prosecutor and commentary from the NSSF that kind of calls some of that into question.
Right.
So, you know, just because
Well,
there's
I read it all. I mean, I read
yeah, yeah,
it.
good. Please
I
do.
don't do
Like
this for a living.
and all of
Uh,
and all of your listeners, I hope they read it all too. And if you don't like it, that's okay. Like, know that not everything we write is just trying to like get you to like outdoor life or
Mm.
like be like, oh yeah, outdoor life is we don't what I don't think is good in this industry, in this hunting media, hunting industry, is group think. Because what you said is true, which is most hunters are conservative. Um, most of the firearms industry is conservative. Most of the hunting industry itself, most of the hunting media is all conservative. We're not going to be able to challenge each other or, kind of call conservative candidates or policies into question if we're only just like talking in an echo chamber and not
Oh,
getting
sure.
commentary or
I mean,
quotes from
I've I've had
other
Ted Cruz
parties.
on here before multiple times, and I'm going to vote for Cruz again in his reelection campaign. But like, I do have an issue with his take on public lands. One time he told me on the show, "Well, I mean, Texas, we were 98% privately owned,
Yeah,
and he's kind of in the same mindset as Mike Lee. Now Utah has what is Utah like 80% public land, massive. It's not a lot of private land in Utah,
right.
and Mike Lee thinks that's too much.
Yeah,
That's neither here nor there. But Ted was like, well, in Texas, most people can just get a deer lease. I'm like, no, that costs money. That's not the same thing as public land.
right.
That's not. And so I was like, we're just gonna have to agree to disagree on that. Like I'm still gonna vote for you because of all these other things that I believe represent my interest. But it's like, which politician do you agree with 60% of the time? That's the one you're gonna vote for.
Right. Yeah, and we have to take into account that there are a lot larger issues for many people in this election than hunting and fishing.
Hmm.
So, what we're trying to do here with our coverage is not tell you who to vote for. We're just giving you information about the campaigns, the candidates on the topics that we specialize in, which is hunting, fishing, conservation, and the Second Amendment.
Hmm.
You may read one of these stories and be like, yeah, I really agree with everything that the candidate or campaign is, you know, actioning toward in the hunting, fishing, and shooting space. But I'm still not going to vote for them because there's these other bigger issues that I care about more.
Hmm.
And that's fine. Like we're in a very complex, kind of fraught time in American history. Like I don't expect someone to be like, "Oh, I'm going to vote for this candidate because there's like a fraction of a percentage that there's going to be, more walk-in access, in my state."
Right.
When there's kind of key philosophical and like practical issues at stake in the election as well. But outdoor life, we cover hunting, fishing, conservation. So that's what we're reporting on. And whether you vote for these candidates, uh, at least you'll know what they've
Hmm.
said, what folks have said about them in these categories.
Would you say, looking back on the current administration, like I think Deb Haaland personally has just been a dumpster fire. We've lost access, and like Andrew reported on the Bears ear thing, we lost that for. And the thing about that, in reading that article, was there haven't been any incidents that warranted closing 1.3 million acres to shooters. We
Yeah.
just did it. We've
Yeah.
closed huge swaths, which Tyler's written great articles for Outdoor Life on, of
Yeah.
Alaskan public land to moose and caribou hunting with no science to support that. And
Yeah.
so I look back and I'm like, what did we lose under Trump? Not much. If anything, we gained a lot we gained access as far as acreage is concerned. We lost under
Yeah.
this administration. So I don't know. Maybe if Harris is saying we're going to do stuff different, if it's more Deb Haaland, well, that ain't different. That's worse.
Yeah.
It's bad.
Yeah. I think,
Preservation isn't conservation, and she seems to be a preservationist.
I think it's fair to say that the interior has not made hunters and hunting a focus of their 4 years.
Mhm.
You know,
And we're going
uh,
to ban lead shot on all these new refuges,
yeah,
and like
yeah. I mean, there's you
ask
talk to
ask the NSSF how they feel about that.
oh yeah, No, we have.
I know.
It's gonna be in the story. There's a whole section on, potential lead ammo bans and hunting access closures on federal lands in this story,
Mm,
and that's like real stuff you can see on the ground right now, right? So
mm,
it's very understandable and makes perfect sense that hunters would be like, "Yup, this administration is not for us."
yeah.
Um, with the Trump administration, you know, uh, yeah, there's a bunch of good stuff that happened. We already referenced the Great American Outdoors Act. They didn't sell all the public lands.
Right.
Um, they didn't ban guns. Like all the kind of key things that hunters want and need existed. There were issues though, especially you get into some of these like kind of iconic federal lands, destinations, um, here in Minnesota, the Boundary Waters Canoe
I love
Area
it, dude. I've been
Wilderness.
there. I've done 5 trips up there.
Yeah, amazing
The
place.
best
There,
smallmouth bass fishing I've ever experienced.
sure. There's
Yeah.
there was a proposed mine outside of the Boundary Waters that the Trump administration was trying to, basically make it possible to implement.
Mm,
And that was a big battle here. There's a lot of folks in that part of the state who are for it, but pretty much all of the hunting, fishing organizations from this area opposed it.
right.
In Alaska, the Tongass National Forest, under the Trump administration, they tried to withdraw the roadless rule protections from the Tongass, which again, there are a lot of people in that part of the country, part of the state who are for it because it would increase, development, hopefully boost the economy a little bit. But and I wrote stories about both these places. I interviewed all the people, like all
I read
the
them.
yeah, all the sportsmen, all the hunters and anglers from that area opposed that, right? They didn't want it. They wanted to keep roadless rule protections. So ultimately, neither of those two things happened. The sky didn't fall out. We still have the Boundary Waters. We still have the Tongass. But the Trump administration was pushing for development in and around these areas. So, you know, you said you said before public lands, that's what like we conservatives have to work on.
Mhm.
Like that goes for the Trump administration too. Like
Oh yeah.
there are things that like if that administration wins, like we're going to have to report on critically. Um,
Which I expect and I think is fair. But I will say this: if we, as conservatives, upped our public land, the emphasis we put on public lands, if we did that and people hunters still wanted to vote Democrat, then I'm just like, geez, because I think that's the one sticking point that I see on
yeah,
social media and interacting with people. It's like, well, vote conservative, say goodbye to public lands, and my rebuttal is, yeah, well, vote Democrat, say goodbye to the things that fund the public land that you say
yeah,
that you love. And so,
yeah.
like going back to cart before the horse, but if we did better as conservatives on protecting public lands, then I mean, maybe we could start to win back some of those Democrats that love hunting in the outdoors as well. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I believe that it is a place to bring people together. Like that's a physical place, but also a philosophical place to bring people together of like, oh, you're kind of a more liberal leaning person, but you like hunting on this national forest. Yeah,
Mm.
well, I'm like a diehard conservative and I like hunting this national forest too. Maybe we should work together to make sure that we get to maintain this access and maintain this habitat. Like it can be, and we've seen it in the past. Um, it can be a good place for like these bipartisan efforts. Um, we just got to be, we got to be smart enough to talk to the other side and, read content about the other side and, have some understanding and not just make it be like us versus them, like to the death. Like that, you're not going to get anyone over to your side if there's no, if there's no accessibility to your side. Um,
Well, and I'm very critical of the Democrat hunter. and I have been. I won't apologize for that. But ultimately, my goal would be to get them to vote this way. But if
Yeah.
their hang up is, well, you guys suck on public lands, I mean, okay, there's points where, yeah, you're not wrong. So, like what I said to Ted Cruz is, we'll just have to
Yeah.
agree to disagree and try to do better in that realm so that, hey, maybe we can protect all of these things, right?
Yeah.
At the same time.
Yeah.
That's my goal anyway.
Yeah.
Well, man, I appreciate you coming on and kind of just giving me your take and outdoor life's stance on what happened, because like I said, it was it rubbed people the wrong way. So I wanted to give you the floor here to explain, hey, this
Yeah.
is who we are, what we do, why we did it. People can react however they want. That's totally up to them, just like the way they vote. But I think, I think y'all took a lot of heat, and I made a post, was like, I don't really agree with this, but I'm not disavowing outdoor life, or
Yeah.
like saying, and I was very clear, I was like, don't unfollow outdoor life.
Yeah.
If you disagree with this, like I do, it doesn't mean that it's bad. Like the outdoor life is all of a sudden not worth paying attention to or not valuing their content,
Yeah.
because that wasn't what I took away from it.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate that. I really do, value the opportunity to just like better explain what we're doing. I think a lot of the kind of anger backlash came from not understanding what we're doing. And some of that is on us for not explaining it properly out of the gate. Um, and then I think some of it too is just there's not a lot of media out there trying to do what we do in the hunting and fishing space, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's not a lot of media that's like, hey, we're going to report on hunting and fishing news in a bipartisan fashion. So I can understand how folks would just see something about the Harris Walz campaign when so much other outdoor media is partisan and be like, oh, Outdoor Life obviously supports Harris Walz because that's the content that they see outside of us.
Mm-hmm.
But that really is what we're trying to do. We're trying to report on this stuff in a bipartisan or nonpartisan fashion. And, you know, I hope that folks read the two stories that we're going to be publishing, this week. And I hope that, whether they like the stories or not, or whether they believe the quotes from the politicians or not, that they at least appreciate what we're trying to do here, which is inform readers more about the folks who are running for president.
Right on, right on. Last question. I've been staring at this doll sheep behind you this whole interview. Where did you shoot that guy?
So that was from the Yukon. Yeah,
Okay.
I went up there and did a hunt. Man, was that 3 years ago now? Yeah, three falls ago. Yeah.
And then would you say that is the pinnacle of your hunting career?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah,
That's the
that's
coolest.
awesome.
That's, outside of my two daughters and marrying my beautiful, lovely wife, that's the coolest thing I've ever done in my life. Was going on that hunt and shooting that ram. Yeah, it was.
That's so cool.
I think about it every day.
How
I
many
really do.
days was the hunt?
I think it was a 10-day hunt, and I shot the ram, I think, on the seventh day. But a lot of like a lot of hunting in the Yukon is just like logistical stuff. So it's like a 10-day hunt, but one of the days you're riding, one of the days you're flying in to base camp, and then one of the days you're horse packing into a spike camp. And then, day three is it was snowing and we were fogged in, so like we couldn't get up into the mountains. Um, so a lot of like there are some really romantic, like cool, just what you imagine hunting the Yukon is. But with that, there's a whole bunch of kind of logistical stuff that you just have to be really patient with, um, and just kind of wait it out. Because a lot of it is just like going from one camp to the next, waiting for the weather to clear, waiting for the rams to move. It's a lot of waiting around. But you're surrounded by like the most epic, beautiful scenery that you could possibly imagine. So it's worth it.
Yeah. I did a bear hunt with a guy in Alberta 8 or 9 years ago, and we were just talking about how expensive hunting in the Yukon in general had gotten.
Yeah.
It's like, well, you mentioned the word logistics, and he said you have to understand, like, by the time I take the 75-cent bell pepper into the Yukon, it's now a $6 bell pepper
Yeah.
because everything is a logistical nightmare there.
Yeah. 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 100%. I mean, like one of the huge things is like feed for the horses, you
Mm.
know, like they can eat the mountain grass and stuff to a point, but like they also have to fly in like actual feed for them.
Huh.
So yeah, everything up there is just, but like back in the old days, like the Jack O'Connor days, like the, old school outdoor life, like dudes would go on these hunts for like months, right? Like they would be gone.
Yeah.
You would take a train up there and then a pack train, and like you would be gone for basically the entire fall, and to hunt sheep and caribou and moose and grizzly bears, and you would do the whole thing like a big safari, because the logistics back then were like crazy,
Yeah.
and dangerous. That's what's kind of taken out of it now. Like now it's all pretty safe, and as long as you're in fairly decent shape, you can do it. Um, but back then it was like really grueling. Like you had to be a little tougher
Mm.
than some of the hunters of today.
I was talking to a guy at a, I think it was a Ducks Unlimited banquet. It was my buddy's grandfather, and I was sitting by him, and he was in his late 70s, early 80s, still pretty spry, and like he wasn't physically handicapped or anything, but he told me he'd done the North American sheep slam like 3 times,
Oh
and
my
he killed
God.
like 5 or 6 Dall sheep, and he lives in Texas. And I'm like, dude, how did you afford that? He goes, man, when I started going there in the late 70s, early 80s, a Dall sheep was like $1,500.
Yeah.
I was like, $1,500.
Yeah.
He's like, yeah, they were
Yeah.
just giving them away. Like, if you could get there, you could hunt whatever you wanted.
Jack O'Connor wrote a really good piece about this. And it was kind of like the death of that was this sheep slam,
Yeah.
because it sort of it put like a goal on it, and it sort of became like I don't want to badmouth anyone, and like anyone who can't afford to do this. Like if I was a multimillionaire and I could just fly around the world, doing sheep slams, I 100% would do that.
I would be right there with you.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's go together one day
Yeah.
when, you hit it big. Take me with you. But that idea of like getting a slam kind of changed sheep hunting into this like really high dollar thing, because for a lot of for a lot of folks, like that's kind of like it's kind of like a status, like a
It's the
rich
pinnacle.
guy's
Yeah.
it's like a rich guy status symbol that other rich guys don't have, right? Like you can buy a fancy car, you could, sit courtside at the Lakers game or whatever, but like to go get a sheep slam, like you had to like do stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So there's some, like the guide that I had, he's taken multiple people on sheep hunts. It was their first hunt ever.
Are
Their
you
first hunt,
serious?
their first hunt in their life
Oh my
was
God.
a sheep hunt,
That's
because they,
crazy.
they wanted to get a sheep slam, because they, there's like
Yeah.
this thing, this like point of pride. Which, on the other hand, you have like the lifelong hunter who saved, he's a contractor, he's been saving his entire life, and he gets to go do this. And like, that's the dream hunt. That's what it was like for me. Like, I'm
Mm.
probably only gonna get to do this once, maybe twice if I'm lucky, but like, this is my dream.
Mm-hmm.
And for that, the guide was like, that's actually the client that makes me the nervous, like most nervous, because like their like hopes and dreams are just like riding on and if something goes bad, like you can just see it, like it
Yeah.
hits them, and they're like, oh God, this hunt is like slipping away. Um, but he said when those guys do shoot the rams, then it's just, it's the greatest thing in the world, because it means so much to them. So
Yeah. Well, the price just keeps going up on sheep, and I booked British Columbia mountain goat hunt in 2022 for 2026, and that's the most I've ever spent on a hunt. I'm like,
yeah,
and a Dall sheep was like put an extra 10 on top of what I spent. I'm
yeah.
just like, I can't swing it, but I'm super stoked about that. But also, if I don't get one, I'm sure the guy's gonna feel sick to his stomach.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Because he's gonna see it in your eyes. He's like,
Uh-huh.
wow, no one's wanted a goat as bad as this guy wants to
Yeah.
shoot a goat.
Right.
And there's only so much you can do,
Oh yeah. It's the way
Sometimes it
hunting
just
goes.
doesn't go your way. But yeah, that'll be quite an adventure for you, I'm sure. And
Yeah.
I do hope you get one.
Well, right on, man. Well, I hope you have a great fall. Thanks again for the time today. I certainly do appreciate it.
Yeah. Hey, I appreciate you. Thank you for doing
All
this.
right. Take care.